Greetings from the United States. Hope you are doing very well. Very excited to talk with you today about storytelling, in particular, how to sell more of your ideas, your products, and your services with stories. Since I am a storytelling coach, I think it's only fitting that I start with a story for you. Back in 2008, I was a financial planner. I was giving a presentation, a retirement planning workshop to a group of professional businesswomen. And it wasn't going well at all. In the first 5 minutes, I just had this feeling that they didn't like me. There was something going on in the room. I just didn't know what it was. But finally, I stopped and I asked them, have I done or said something to make you mad? And one of the women in the back of the room, named Leslie, she raised her hand and she said, "Yeah, I have a question. What's your deal?" I said, "What do you mean, what's my deal?" She said, "What's your deal, Michael? The last two speakers that have come in here and spoken have just tried to sell us their products or their services. They didn't give us any useful information. What's your deal? What are you trying to sell us?" I have to confess, I stood there for what felt like an eternity saying nothing. I didn't know what to say because I was there to help give them useful information. So after what felt like an eternity, as I said, I got this idea. I had to say something. I couldn't stand up there all night. The idea was to tell them a story about my mom. So I figured I have nothing to lose, I might as well. So I told them the story about my mom in the late 1980s. At that time, my mom was trying to start a business, and she was having great difficulty. I sat down with her one day, and she said, "Michael, I can't get a business loan or a credit card. I just can't get anybody to lend me money." And I said, "Mom, I don't understand. Why not? You're really good with money. You're very good at saving. You pay your bills on time. You're very good with money." She said, "Yes, but the problem is that everything financially, all the money matters were in your father's name, the credit cards, the bank loans, the car loans. So when we got a divorce, he took all that with him." And she had so many different emotions. She was angry. She was frustrated. But what was worst of all is when she looked at me and she said, "Michael, this whole situation has made me feel like I'm a nobody, like I don't exist." So in that room of all those 28 business women, I looked at them and I said, the reason I do this, yes, I would love to attract new clients, but the biggest reason, I don't ever want to see another woman feel the way my mom did that day. And I looked at them for what felt like several seconds. And finally, I looked at Leslie, the woman who had challenged me, and she said, "We're good. Carry on with your presentation. I'm fine." And that changed the mood in the room. And it was one of the best presentations I'd ever experienced. But what was really interesting, when it was over, I walked over and I talked to Leslie and I said, "I need to know something. What changed your mind? Why did you didn't want me to speak? You didn't trust me. And then you did. What changed?" She said, "Michael, it was the story of your mom." She said, "When I heard you tell that, I could tell you really did care. You were authentic. You were genuine. And I started to trust you." That was the big challenge that changed my life. She challenged my purpose for being in that room. But because of that, I changed my whole approach to presentation. And what's even better about this story is that normally when our group would do our financial presentations, we had about a 23% rate of people who wanted to sign up for an individual meeting with us. After that session, it was 57%. We increased 2.5 times the number of people who wanted to sit down and maybe do business with us. And remember, this is a group that was always being sold to. They voluntarily came to us. Now, I got lucky that night. Out of desperation, I told a story. But when we realized what had happened, we did some research in our group. And it became a permanent part of our presentations, these stories. And eventually I became so enamored. I love this topic so much that I retired from financial planning so I could go out and help other entrepreneurs, other sales professionals who struggle to get business. One of my biggest frustrations for people is when I know they have a good product or service and they're not selling it and helping people's lives because they're not telling a good story. So that's my whole purpose for doing this, is because of my own struggles to communicate the value of a product or service. I want to help you and anybody watching this to do the same thing. So I always love to start my kind of the teaching part of my programs with this question: what is a story? Well, let me tell you what a story is not. This is not a story. There once was a princess who met a prince. They fell in love and married, and they lived happily ever after. That's not really a story. And the reason it's not, because there's no real emotion to it. You can say that, the love part is an emotion, but there's nothing negative going on. This does become a story if you add one sentence. There once was a princess who met a prince. They fell in love and married and lived happily ever after until the abduction. What just happened in your brain when you saw the phrase "until the abduction"? Chances are very good that you started asking questions. Who got abducted? Who abducted that person? What did they do? Did the person live? Did the person die? Your brain is wired to start asking those kinds of questions. We can't change that. So stories do not begin until we create some kind of conflict. And this is true even in business stories, especially in business stories. So there are three keys to creating a meaningful and memorable story: compelling characters who face a conflict that creates some type of change in that person's life. So let's start with compelling characters. There are two important kinds you have to have. Now, there are other side characters, but we want to have a main character who we call the hero, often called the protagonist or the main character. This is the person who is going to go through struggles. This individual has a goal. They want to achieve something. They've got a motivating force. But along the way, they're going to go through some conflict. And at some point, a guide or a guru will meet this person and offer some advice. The important aspect to remember about a hero is this person has to be somebody who's relatable. A big challenge I hear with a lot of speakers and business people is they often try to portray themselves as never having had a problem. They have all this success. Well, that sounds good at first, but if you think about it, do you really relate to that person? I haven't met a human being yet. I don't care if it's somebody at the top of the corporate world or a person who's at the front lines just starting their career. I haven't met a person who hasn't had difficulties in life. And one of the biggest challenges I have when I work with clients is that they don't understand the power of the struggle. That's what makes them relatable, how other people think, okay, this person is like me. And that way I buy into their story. I believe it. Think about me when I was standing in front of those women. When they challenged me and said, what are you trying to sell us? And I didn't know what to do. Did you feel like you understood what I was going through? Even though maybe you've never been a financial advisor, you've never stood in front of a group of people who said, hey, what are you trying to sell us? You've experienced something similar. So that was me taking the journey of struggle. I wanted to accomplish, my goal was to help these women improve their financial lives. And they gave me a conflict. So that made me relatable. The guide is the person who comes in and teaches you a lesson. In this case, in my story, it was Leslie, the audience member. At first, she didn't trust me at all. And when I told that story out of desperation about my mom, at the end, she taught me a valuable lesson when she said, because of your story, I believed you, you were authentic, and I began to trust you. When she said that, it was a new revelation for me. It was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this about stories. I need to go learn more. Leslie taught me a new way. Those two people are critical in a story. A hero, a flawed character who has a goal, who has a conflict, who at some point meets the guide or the guru who teaches that person a new way to look at the world. Those are compelling characters. Circumstances. This is the situation that a person is in where they meet some kind of frustration. They are living their everyday life. They have a challenging situation come up in pursuit of a goal. And that's what creates the emotion in the story, the conflict that we talked about earlier. And one of the big challenges that I see for a lot of people with their stories is they spend a lot of backstory in the beginning on time and place. And I wanted to make sure you walk away understanding, don't spend too much time on the where and the when. Or, for example, in my story, before I learned how to tell stories correctly, I would have spent a lot of time on the fact that I'd been a financial planner for 15 years. And this was a group of business women that had been introduced to me by various clients. And it was a nice setting in a restaurant it was hot outside. It was the summertime. All these factors that don't really matter. What you want to do as quickly as possible is get your audience into the situation. So now the way I tell it is what you heard is, I'm a financial advisor. It's the summer of 2008, and I'm giving a presentation, but it's not going well. Within about 15 seconds, we're into the conflict. The old version, I used to tell it took 3 to 4 minutes to get into the conflict. And I'm not sure how it is in Russia, but in the United States, audiences today have an attention span that is extremely short. So we don't want them to start getting distracted, pulling out their cell phones. We want to pull them into the conflict as soon as possible. A note about goals. The goal also has to be something that the audience can relate to. If I'm talking to a group of speakers or prospective speakers, I will tell them the story of a client who, when I first met her, was scared to speak or stressed out about giving a speech, couldn't sleep at night, sick to her stomach. It was really a negative experience for her. And by the end of the story, she's a successful speaker who loves the idea of getting in front of a group and giving a presentation. So we want to show that goal that the person has that the audience can relate to. It wouldn't do me a lot of good if I was talking to a group of what we call here in the States road crew construction people who just work on roads all day. They don't do presentations or give speeches, so that's not my audience. So always make sure that the goal of the character in your story relates to the people you're talking to. And then about conflict. Conflict is a critical part of circumstances. In fact, without conflict, there really is no story because that's where the emotion comes in. Let's go back to my opening story. I was telling you about being a financial planner, and I was giving a presentation in the summer of 2008 to a group of business women. Okay. So far, that's just facts. The conflict, when I said the word but it wasn't going well. That's the equivalent of the story I used earlier of until the abduction. That's when the conflict begins. So as you're crafting your story, ask yourself, how quickly can I get into the conflict? So we've heard about characters. You've heard about circumstances. The third part, one of the third keys, and this is a part of stories that I often see left out. This is the change. What audiences want more than anything else when they hear a good business story is they want hope. When I was a financial advisor, I had to give people hope that their financial situation could get better. Maybe they were struggling, trying to figure out how they could retire or send their children to college or pay the fewest amount of taxes. There are various goals with people for money, but we have to make it something that gives them hope that they can overcome that obstacle. When I talk to speakers who are afraid, they have all these negative feelings, they're stressed out, we've got to give them hope that can change, that they can enjoy speaking and not be nervous and stressed out. So there are 3 factors to change. We want to show the external change. In other words, what happens on the outside world. For me as a financial advisor, I was doing workshops that were only getting about a 23% success rate as far as attracting new clients. Well, a big change is going from 23% to 57%. That's a massive change. In fact, once we started studying storytelling as a group and learned how to do it intentionally rather than accidentally, our success rate went to 77%. We tripled our effectiveness in presentation skills just by incorporating storytelling into our financial workshops. Now, on the surface, that's a really good goal. That gives people hope that, yes, stories can work. Again, the change has to be relatable. So if I'm talking to salespeople, I need to tell a story where maybe the audience felt good, they started to trust me, like Leslie said. They also need to see some numbers. We don't want to bombard them with numbers, but we have to show a tangible, measurable result. So we went from 23 to 77% in the long run. That's a relatable goal. What's more relatable, though, is the internal change. And this is what a lot of speakers and storytellers leave out. As a presenter, if you are feeling stressed out, if you're anxious, if you're sick to your stomach, that's not positive. That doesn't help you give your best possible presentation. If you can feel confident, knowing that you're prepared, that you have a chance to have an influence and leave an impact on people, that is a positive internal change. And that is what is more relatable to an audience. Not everybody's a financial advisor. So if I just went and told the fact that we got more people to become financial planners, financial planning clients, that's impressive, but you may not feel a connection with me on that. But when I say I went from being scared to death to confident that we could use stories in our presentations to make a big difference in people's lives, to make sure more people had a solid financial plan because we were communicating stories to give them hope, and that gave me confidence and made me more effective, you can relate to that more. Because it doesn't matter what you do for a living. Everybody wants to be confident. They want to have an influence, an impact on people, and they want to know that they have a better chance to attract new clients. If you're in sales or if you're a leader, that people will follow your lead and do what you ask them to do. So make sure that you spend some time on the change that occurs in your main character, going from the external situation, whether it's financial, relationship issue, business, or career, where they're struggling, to where they are today. They're successful. They have more income. They've got a better relationship. But underneath that, make absolutely sure that you're giving a picture of how that person was feeling negatively in the beginning of the story. And by the end of that story, they had a lot of positive feelings, confidence. They felt like they have more of an impact and influence. They knew they could get the job done. So that, in a nutshell, is the 3 keys to a story that is meaningful and memorable and will create a lasting connection with your audience. So I know you may have questions at this point. It's kind of a lot of information to go through in a short time, and the organizers will make these available to me. So if you'll submit your questions to the organizers, I will make sure to answer those for you via email. Now, before I go, there is one complimentary free resource I'll make available to you. A lot of my clients and even people who aren't clients really enjoy this. It's called 52 Storytelling Tips. What this is a weekly series of 5-minute audios that you get sent to your email inbox. And the idea behind this is that one tip will build on top of the other. Rather than trying to give you everything at once, which is not always an easy way to learn, you get one tip and you can go out and practice it in your presentations. Then come back, learn another tip, do the same thing over and over again. And in 1 year's time, if your experience is like mine, you will become 3 times more effective. We tripled our effectiveness in the financial planning business. And I know the same thing can happen for you. So if you'd like to sign up for those, you can go to the address listed here, speakingcpr.com, 52 Storytelling Tips. There's no cost, there's no obligation to you. And I'm very conscious of the world today with people's names and information being sent out there. This is my list. I don't sell the list. Totally protected from that. So please submit any questions you have to the organizers. And I'll leave you with this thought. Back in 2008, I got really lucky one night when I told a story out of desperation because I had an audience that didn't like me. It wasn't me they didn't like. It was actually because of other speakers that had been in to talk to their group. But the bottom line is I didn't have their trust. With one story, an authentic story that came from my experience with my mother, I was able to create trust, at least start to build trust in about 4 minutes. That's how long it took me to tell that story. If I can do that, not knowing anything of what you've just learned, imagine what you could do just introducing a character who's relatable to your audience, who goes through some relatable circumstances, has a conflict which people can understand, and on the end of that story goes through a positive change that makes a huge difference in their lives. You're going to give people hope. And when you do that, you have left a significant impact on others, and you've made the world a better place. Best of luck with your stories, and I hope to see you and hear your story soon.